This is only the third session of the ROSA Gallery Journal, but I want to do a quick refresher on the tools and supplies. So, I'm working with the ROSA Gallery monopigmented set of 21 watercolors, several brushes from Princeton's Aqua Elite line, a Be Creative cotton cold press watercolor sketchbook, and a couple of ceramic mixing palettes. Hi, I'm Irene. This is Inkworks, and repetition is becoming more and more useful for me. In fact, I just read a book while simultaneously listening to the audio recording. Well, technically I read a little ahead and the audio was repeating and reinforcing the text. Anyway, it actually assisted me to focus and not get distracted by other thoughts, like figuring out how to prepare the chicken thighs for dinner, or pondering if today's the day I leave the house and break out of self-imposed hermitry. The featured color this time is Cadmium Yellow Light, made with pigment PY35. The previous video, Cadmium Yellow, used the same pigment. But while that one was a cool yellow, this one leans warm. Also in that previous video, the name Cadmium Yellow was a mistake on my part, since it's actually Cadmium Lemon. Oopsie. But let's not bicker and argue about who killed who, because I really want to talk about the positives of watercolors, such as their delightful transparency, allowing for the layering and intensifying of color. Also, watercolors are relatively easy to clean up. A damp towel will wipe splatters away, while a simple rinse in the sink is often good enough for brushes and water jars. Oh, and don't underestimate the advantage of a ceramic mixing surface. It's smooth, non-porous, stain-resistant, and paint is less likely to bead, meaning you can create generous pools of color rather than stingy bead-like ones. In my opinion, the only way you could possibly improve watercolors is to make them delicious, but they aren't and never will be. In fact, they can be toxic, so don't try tasting them. Doesn't matter if they're named lemon, cocoa, or asparagus. Paint is not food. We went over this last month. Now that the subject of food has been broached, the gates to my favorite topic are wide open. Asterisk, mwahaha, snort, asterisk. Wait, no, I did that wrong. So, is anyone else a fan of the Kerrygold Dubliner cheese from Costco? It's firm, salty, and great for snacking. Come to think of it, color-wise, it's not far from Cadmium Yellow Light, in watered-down wash form anyway. I usually just have it with a soft, chewy hunk of bread, but I want to try the Dubliner as a topping, grated over a fresh green salad or an oven-baked casserole. I'm no turophile, but I have my cheese preferences. Smoked Gouda, sharp cheddar, grilled halloumi, and a melty mozzarella are some of my current faves. Some years back, I just acquired a taste for blue cheese when I experienced a spoiled batch, sicked it up, and have staunchly avoided it ever since, which is too bad, since I have a fond, if vague, memory of my first ever Cobb salad. I believe it was at the Cattleman's Wharf restaurant several decades ago. I was on a business trip with my employers and spent 4 days in Anaheim. They treated me for every meal, and I experienced a number of food firsts. My first Cobb salad, my first Wolfgang Puck restaurant, my first anisette cordial, and even my first Krispy Kreme donuts. So, yeah, the fact that I can't smell blue cheese now without gagging is a bummer. Speaking of blue, we aren't at the blue mixes yet. Put a pin in that. I want to talk about other stuff anyway, like the newest Disney cruise ship, Disney Adventure. It just had its inaugural sailing, so there's been a lot of fresh content coming out. The ship is both huge and cramped, both bougie and lowbrow, both cool and cringe. Look, I've never been on a cruise, Disney or otherwise, but I've daydreamed about it often enough that I kind of feel like an aficionado. And that's saying something, because the last time I claimed aficionado status on anything, it was on a public message board, and I spelled it with an O, like official nado. I was so embarrassed. I disappeared into self-exile for a week. So I just want you all to know that this time, while writing this script, I spelled it properly with an A. I'm okay with the aficionado label because it signifies an enthusiast's or a hobbyist's level of knowledge. I don't use the term connoisseur as much because that denotes a higher level of expertise and authority. Anyway, I enjoyed the vlogs showing what the new Disney Adventure cruise ship looked like inside and outside, but I was disappointed yet again that the Disney ducks haven't gotten their due. Other than a few costumed cast members, it seems there is very little to satisfy fans of Donald, Daisy, Scrooge, Darkwing, or Launchpad. If I were in charge, there'd be an entire ship representing the ducks. It would include venues themed after Duckburg and St. Canard. Starboard can have a dry slide where you fall into Scrooge McDuck's money pit, a Junior Woodchuck's pool deck activity center, and some escape room treasure-finding adventures. Portside can have Lilliput's Goonie Golf, a hamburger hippo service counter, a coaster-type ride on Ratcatcher cycles, and a spooky table service restaurant called the Shadow Chateau. I have ideas. You might be wondering, but Irene, are you some sort of Darkwing duck nut? Yes. In fact, my decades-old DW graphic tee is quite worn and holy, and you'd have to wrest the thing from my cold, dead torso. Okay, now I can talk about those mixes and how much I like the resultant shades of green, because I do love greens. PG8, what ROSA Gallery is calling simply green, is already a nice color on its own, but the addition of cadmium yellow light turns it into a warm, very natural-looking earthy green. But things get even more interesting when you pair cadmium yellow light with a blue pigment. For instance, bright blue, PB153, which is commonly known as phthalo blue green shade. Well, the mixes for that combo show a nice range from bright leafy green to a mid-value teal. I've said it before, I may not care for phthalo colors on their own, but as mixing components, they're powerhouses. That reminds me, it's been nearly 20 years since I've been to the local Powerhouse Brew Pub. I recall it was a cool spot to get fried food and a craft beer. Of course, with all the substation hardware and accoutrements hanging around, it was hard to not hear the famous powerhouse tune in your head. You know, the one used in a couple of the old Warner Brothers Looney Tunes. Although Powerhouse the tune has been around since the 1930s, the version I'm most familiar with is the one on the Space Capades album from the Ultra Lounge Music series. That's a multi-volume collection of recordings from the 50s and 60s. Thanks to my older brother Al, I had a handful of the individual CDs. Each one came with an inner pamphlet full of mid-century imagery, including a drink recipe. Although I admire some of the aesthetics, I'm not a huge mid-century fan. But even I've fantasized about rocking leopard print leggings and a cocktail shaker while Ima Sumac spins on the hi-fi. This is making me hungry again, as it brings to mind Bitchin' Kitchen with Nadia G. Did you catch that show on the Cooking Channel? I think it was the early 2010s, and Nadia was different from the cookie-cutter cooking shows on cable TV. Whipping up meals in her retro outfits, she had humor and attitude going for her. Then, after only a couple of seasons, her show was canceled. That was when I completely gave up on cable cooking. What else was keeping me there? The next Food Network star? They wanted personality, but then they would mold contestants to fit their narrow formula. Top Chef? I liked the competitive cooking aspect, but I loathed the reality TV angle. So after years of subsisting on Jamie Oliver, Rachel Ray, Nigella Lawson, and Alton Brown, cutting the cable cord wasn't all that painful, because I went on to discover a bunch of YouTube food channels, or food tubers, such as Cooking with Dog, America's Test Kitchen, Food Wishes, Monchi, Cowboy Kent Rollins, Tabby Eats, Mark Wiens, etc., etc., which, in my opinion, are way more entertaining than what Food Network or the Cooking Channel were putting out. By the way, the mixes using carmine, magenta rose, and violet on the middle row, as well as umber and burnt umber on the bottom row, remind me of culinary spices. Mustard, ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, and the cobalt blue and ultramarine mixes, also on the bottom row, make me think of herbs like chicory, sage, or tarragon. Is it any wonder my mind is on food? You may have noticed that the brushes I'm using are all flats. A 3/4 inch wash for the main swatch, a 1/4 inch stroke for the mix swatches, and a 1/2 inch angled shader for the sample painting. No particular reason, except I'm partial to flat brushes. I enjoy the chisel-like marks they make. Hey, don't put me in charge of an apocalypse survival group. I'd be crap in a crisis. Can you imagine many arting opportunities in a bunker? At best, I'd be Joel in Love and Monsters, whose most important contribution was kitchen duty. For the floral painting part of this spread, things were chugging along, and I was rather pleased with how it was turning out. Bright, cheery, and season-appropriate. But, man, I did not know when to hit the brakes. That's right, my colorful spring bouquet turned into an autumnal harvest arrangement. To be fair, there's always a part of me that's anticipating the joys of fall, so no shocks there. In fact, I haven't stopped pumping spicy goodness into my hot beverages, and I won't have to, at least through the summer, since my BFF hooked me up with those big bottles of pumpkin pie flavored syrup. She gets me. It may be hard to believe, but I can be as nitpicky as the next person. I know, it doesn't seem possible. Sure, I put producer Mike through the ringer earlier when I asked him to fix me a cup of coffee. Make sure you add precisely 1.5 pumps of syrup. No, not 1, and definitely not 2. Are you okay in there? Do I have to do it myself? The point is, I'm having a hard time coming up with any real complaints about these ROSA Gallery watercolors. I have several favorite brands that I would rate higher than these, but those are all much pricier. Taking cost into account, I think the value you get with the ROSA Gallery sets is exceptional. But it's still early days, so I reserve the right to adjust my assessment down the road. I'm happy to share this watercolor journal session with you. Thanks for watching and supporting Inkworks, because by watching, you are supporting, and every little bit helps. Until next time, remember, there are worse things than food to obsess over. I mean, have you ever been stuck talking to a watercolor aficionado? It's all granulation this and cauliflowering that. And at the end of the day, you can't even drink paint in large amounts because of poisons. So keep your paint water jar far, far from your coffee mug. And stay artsy, my friends.